Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, or Mexico? Where should you travel to? Where should you move to? Short term, long term? Do you need to know Spanish to visit? Can you get away with knowing little to no Spanish? Should you learn the basics? That is what I'm going to let you know in this video, my experience from living in those places, short term and long term. So in today's video, I'm sharing with you, my experience from living in these countries. So Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, or Mexico? Where should you go? So like I said, I've lived in these places, so I'm so grateful. I think they're all so beautiful. If you ever have the opportunity to travel there or to live there for a little or long term, it's beautiful. Obviously, some people may have different experiences, but for me, I've had the best experiences. Spanish is my first language. I am fluent, so that is why I'm sharing my perspective on that aspect of whether you should learn Spanish before you go there. And overall, just sharing my experience from someone who might come off as a güerita, like when you're a gringo and you go to a Spanish-speaking country, you may have a different experience as opposed to somebody else. I'm gonna start with Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico was the first place that I ever traveled alone. I took my first solo trip there as a woman. I did this when I was in college. It was after a really bad breakup. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a solo trip somewhere, an island, and just, live a little. So that is the first place that I ever went to and traveled to alone. And I have been able to go back to Puerto Rico and explore and be there for much longer. So I would say that I have been able to explore pretty much the entire island. Obviously not every single corner, especially not as much as probably a local knows, all the little hidden gems and such. But I have been able to explore pretty much the entire island, and it is very beautiful. Puerto Rico is part of U.S. territory, so you don't need a passport to travel there, and they use, U.S. currency, so that makes it a little easy, especially if it is, your first solo trip. From my experience, especially traveling there alone when I was young and naive, pretty dumb, is very safe. Puerto Rico is very safe. Obviously, every area of the world is gonna have its areas, and just in general, just be vigilant and always, have an eye out there. Like, don't just trust anybody. That goes for any place in the world. But I would say that overall, it's a very safe little island, and it's a very safe place from what I have experienced. Now, if you're an adventurous person, like I'm talking adventurous, like wanting to camp or climb a mountain or climb a volcano or go waterfall hunting without having to have a tour guide or having to pay an entrance fee and have some kind of tour, or just get away from all the touristy kind of adventures, like if you're a very adventurous person, I would say there's not many options in Puerto Rico. There's not that many hiking spots there. I mean, if you're a local, I'm sure you know of like some hidden gems in someone's backyard in the rainforest or something, but overall, like open to the public, there's not that many options. Like you have the rainforest, El Yunque, which is super amazing. It is very touristy. You can either pay to go on a tour with someone and they'll take you, or if you rent a car, or if somehow you buy a car, then you can make your way up there. I think it's really beautiful. Depending on the season, if you're lucky, then you can experience the waterfalls that are there. So if you go to that rainforest, there's a few hikes within it that you can take. But other than that, I mean, there's beautiful beaches everywhere, but when I was there, I rented a car long term. I wasn't able to find any like cool mountains or just like little hiking spots or waterfalls. Like there's not much adventure out there other than like, you know, the rainforest and beaches. With that being said, there are a lot of beautiful beaches. Some of them look quite similar. Some of them have a different vibe. Some of them you have to take the ferry, you know, a boat to get to the beach or the little island. But you can experience an authentic piña colada, authentic rum, piña colada, papaya, mangoes, all those sweet, authentic from the island, very pure, very sweet. So especially piña colada, if you're there, you gotta have one. Now, the cost of living in Puerto Rico, in my opinion, it's expensive. It's pretty much like the States. If you were to rent a place month to month, short or long term, it's almost equates to living in the States. Probably not as expensive as somewhere like New York, thousands a month, but it can get up to even more than that, actually, thousands and thousands. If you are like on a beachfront, of course, you know what I mean? But if you're in some place like San Juan, the little town, you can find an affordable place. You can definitely find an affordable Airbnb, especially if you're staying short term. But I would say that overall cost of living, like, don't think it's going to be cheap. It is an island, you know, so things get imported or they only have access to production there. Things that you will find cheap is obviously like fruits that are from the island. Renting a car can be very affordable there, just do it ahead of time. And authentic Caribbean food, like if you go to a restaurant that is authentic, you can get an affordable plate of food, you know. But other than that, like if you go to the touristy areas and you go out to eat, it's gonna be the same price as the States, pretty much. Now, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you can easily be vegan or vegetarian on the island, you know, island life. Especially nowadays. I was there just a few months ago, actually, and the whole strip of San Juan, which is like a very popular area, Ocean Park, it's pretty touristy, and there are so many new restaurants on that strip, and most of them are vegan or offer vegan options. I feel like it's definitely something that is expanding on the island, just veganism. So you could definitely, you know, be vegan or vegetarian pretty easily. If you cook your own meals, then yeah, you can easily find that at a store. Now, the culture of the island is so beautiful, you know, Caribbean, island life, that's all I can say. Like, you gotta experience it if you've never experienced that Caribbean culture. Now, getting around, I'm pretty sure there's buses there, just like anywhere in the world, honestly. I personally have never taken a bus there, but like I mentioned, renting a car can be very affordable. You can probably even buy one if you're there long term. And they have Uber. They have Uber there, so that's easy to take. Just note that it's pretty much the same cost as if you were to Uber in the States. It's not gonna be cheap. Okay, now Spanish. Do you need to know Spanish to visit, to go travel to Puerto Rico? Honestly, I feel like you can get away with it. You can get away with not knowing a single word in Spanish. However, if you plan on living there long term, you should definitely learn at least the basics of Spanish, like at the minimum basics, like how to talk to someone random, or if you're gonna order food, or how to talk on the phone, like basic Spanish for sure. I feel like for the most part, a lot of people there do speak English, so you can get away with not knowing Spanish. Now, Mexico. All right, so I have yet to explore the country, to be honest. I've only really explored one area of Mexico, so I can't really say too much about it. Although I will say that I am Mexican. I grew up in a Mexican household. All my family is from Mexico, so our culture is very, very beautiful. I am familiar with hearing about certain areas. I also had a lot of friends who are from Mexico and such, but I personally have not had the opportunity to go and live in areas. In my opinion, Mexico is huge. I feel like you can spend months exploring this country. There's a lot out there, I'm sure. Mexico is so big that in terms of safety, especially Mexico, we hear so much about it, how it's not safe, this and that. I mean, currently where I live in Mérida, Mexico, it is very safe. I live here alone. This city specifically is known to be the safest city. There's no crime rates of any sort. So yeah, it's known to be very, very safe. So like I said, I can't really speak for other areas, but I would say you just gotta be careful. Obviously, there are gonna be some areas that are not as safe, but you just gotta look out for yourself, especially if you're alone. Always let someone know where you're at, this and that. But I feel like as a traveler, just be vigilant and you'll be good. In terms of getting around, I've heard there's plenty of buses you can take, but I don't know any specific ones that you can take and that'll take you across the country or to a specific beach. You know what I mean? I haven't heard anything of that sort, and I haven't really done research on it, but I'm sure that renting a car here is pretty affordable, so that can be an option. Another thing to note is that there is Uber, and Uber is very cheap here, honestly, at least in this area, but I feel like it's pretty similar around the country, and maybe some areas of the country doesn't have Uber, so just keep that in mind. Cost of living. Overall, Mexico is pretty affordable, at least in comparison to the US. Now, this area specifically, Mérida, is very, very cheap. I would say is very cheap if we're comparing it to the States. You can easily find a monthly place, a really nice one, for 400, 500 a month. That is nothing that you can find in the States. If you are here short term and you're looking for Airbnbs, there's so many options to rent, and the rooms per night is so cheap. So I would say it's definitely affordable. When it comes to buying actual clothes here, that I would say it's pretty much the same cost, if not more, especially if the brands are imported or whatever. In terms of food, going out to eat is pretty cheap as well, and getting around. So overall, it's very affordable. If you are a vegan or vegetarian, living in Mexico or traveling here is going to be very, very hard for you, because the culture, Mexican culture, they consume so much meat. Like I said in my previous video of why I moved here, there's carnicerias, meateries everywhere. Pretty much every authentic Mexican dish has meat. So if you go somewhere authentic, which is pretty much every restaurant here, because I don't know, so many of the restaurant here are by the owner. Yeah, there's franchises, like I mentioned in my other video, KFC and all that, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about authentic Mexican restaurants. If you go to one and you order a Mexican dish and you say, yeah, but with no meat, you're basically not ordering the dish, because that's the main thing of the dish. You know what I mean? So it may be really hard for you when you go out to eat to get substitutes, unless you get the very basics, which is arroz and frijoles, rice and beans, which people are gonna be like, so you're not gonna eat? Our food is so good. Like, it would be disrespectful almost. So if you go grocery shopping, it will also be very hard for you to find any vegan substitutes, vegan meat, vegan cheese, any of that. Good luck finding it, because they specialize in meatery and cheese, especially Mexican cheese. Mexican cheese is so huge here, of course, right? So white cheese of all sorts. So good luck with that. But if you do go shopping, you're just gonna have to substitute your food somehow. Mexican culture is so beautiful. There's nothing like Mexican culture. So vibrant, so colorful, so much life, so much spice, so much oomph, so much everything, so much energy. Like here, like everybody just wants to help you. They just want to serve, you know? So the culture, if you've never experienced Mexican culture, you should. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. That's all I have to say. Spanish. Do you need to know Spanish to visit Mexico? In my opinion, yes, you do. You need to know, at the minimum, basic Spanish. Since I've been here, since the day that I arrived, not a single person has spoken English to me. Okay, except the other day, the Uber driver thought I didn't speak Spanish. That was really awkward. But other than that, yeah, everyone just straight up just Spanish. They don't even think to ask you, are you American or do you speak? No, they just straight Spanish. Most people here do not speak English. So yeah, you should know at the minimum basic Spanish. If you're gonna live in Mexico for a long term, you can get away with knowing basic Spanish, and slowly you're gonna pick up on more Spanish anyways, especially immersing yourself in the culture and living in the country itself, which is super amazing. So yeah, Mexico is not a country that I feel like you can get away with not knowing a single word. And if you try to, you're most likely are gonna pick up some words, or you're gonna have to use Google Translate or some sort of translation to get around. All right, Costa Rica. This place has my heart. I love Costa Rica. It's one of my favorite places. It feels like home to me. I've had the pleasure to live there twice, 2 different times out of the year, different years, different seasons. I've also been able to explore pretty much the entire country, and I've actually worked in the country. So when I was in college, my first experience is that I did an internship there abroad, and I worked with wildlife. I worked hands-on with sloths, with toucans, with all the wildlife of Costa Rica, which was so beautiful. It was like one of the most expansive experiences of my life. And then I also got to live in the middle of the jungle, literally in the middle of the jungle, taking care of wildlife at a wildlife rehabilitation center. And whenever I had the opportunity on the weekends, I would take a bus and I would go to the other side of the country, or just explore different areas of the country. And I have a lot to say about it, about that country. It is so beautiful. This country is definitely for the adventurous person. If you're someone who likes volcanoes or mountains or beaches or waterfalls or the jungle, getting out there and adventuring, not with touristy people. If you want to go out there alone and do it, you can. Costa Rica is the place for you. Like, there's so much to do. It's overwhelming. It is very overwhelming. And overall, like Puerto Rico and Mexico and just other countries of the world, I'm sure it's the same, that although the country as a whole holds, you know, their culture, whenever you visit a different city or town, they're gonna have a different vibe. So that in itself is a whole experience. I forgot to mention this with Mexico. So Mexico, so Like, let's say you're in the Yucatan, then you go out to eat somewhere, you can experience authentic platos yucatecos, right? Food from there, authentic. Now, if you go to like Michoacan, then they may serve you authentic food, comida michoacana, you know what I mean? That's like a simple example. Or here the Yucatan and the history of the Aztecs as compared to like Cancun and like the touristy shit over there, you know what I mean? Complete different like vibe, right? So now Costa Rica, I feel like you can really distinguish these different vibes through the different corners of the country. Like if I go to the Caribbean, that is a whole different vibe of like Rasta people. If I go to the northern part of the country, then that's like a surfer vibe kind of town, you know? So there's just so much to experience. It really just depends what you're looking for. You can easily take a bus, like I said, from one corner of the country to the other corner of the country. It will be an adventure. The bus will be really, really cheap, but it'll take you like 4 hours to get to the other side. But of course, if you take the early bus, like 5, 6 a.m., then you'll get there with plenty of time to adventure, stay there, experience a new town like I used to do. But the country is definitely set up for tourism, and I feel like that's why they have so much access to these places. Like, I say set up for tourism because I don't know how it is now because of, you know what, in 2021. But like if you go to a bus stop, like a legit one, they have like legit ones, and you go buy a ticket, like the names of the places you want to go to, like La Fortuna or this volcano or this waterfall, like it's set up almost for tourism. You know, obviously locals will take the bus as well because some people actually need to do that to get to work or whatever the case. But if you don't want to rent a car, because I'm sure it's pretty expensive, then you can easily get around on bus. They also have Uber available. Uber is pretty much the same cost as the States. So cost of living, this is such a debatable thing when it comes to Costa Rica. Like you see YouTube videos all about this, like it's so expensive, I'm moving away because it costs too much. And then there's people saying they're moving there because it's so affordable. Honestly, it's affordable and in a sense, quote unquote, cheaper than living in the States because of everything it has to offer. You know, like you could find a nice affordable place on the beach or close to the beach or in a beach town, or live with a volcano view or next to the waterfall for a very affordable place. You can't necessarily do that in the States. So you could definitely find an affordable place, and just overall, it is going to be cheaper than living in the States. Food, going out to eat, it can be affordable, especially if you get, you know, authentic local food. If you go fancy all out on the touristy parts and you order whatever you're out to eat and such, then yeah, that's gonna add up. If you are vegan or vegetarian, you can get away with being both. Vegan might be a little harder, but you know, a lot of their food also has meat. Being vegetarian, you can get away with it. I mean, I tried to be vegan there and I just couldn't. So I was vegetarian though, and you can easily do that. One thing to note is that a lot of their products are either imported or they're just made there in the country, so you may not have access to everything that you do in the States, and that's just something to always know, just traveling in general or visiting another place. Now the culture. Ticos have a very interesting, beautiful culture. Anyone who is from Costa Rica is called a tico or a tica. So what's interesting is they're Spanish, because you can know Spanish, but their vocabulary is I don't know, it's just super interesting. They have specific words that they only use there in that country. So if you're there for a while, you'll pick up on those words. It's kind of like slang, and there's a lot of them. So that's interesting about it. Like, for example, my Spanish is very thick. Whenever I was there, people would always ask, oh, what part of Mexico are you from? Just right away, if I'd get in an Uber or something, I'm like, what? You know? And also there's certain words I would say. For example, if I'm going to say what for someone to repeat something, I'd say mande in my culture, which is what you say in Mexico. But I didn't realize you don't say that in Puerto Rico or Costa Rica. And they're like, where are you from? You can easily give away like that you're not from there just with a simple word. They're like, we don't say that here. Like there's an old guy who like would always give me shit for saying that word mande, but it's such a common thing to say here as a Mexican. But anyways, that's really interesting. So culture in general, like I said, if you go to, just because like, I think Costa Rica is so huge. The locals there debate me on this. They say that it's so small. Honestly, I feel like it's so huge because you can go to the other end of the country and just experience something completely different. And obviously it's smaller in comparison to the US, but you know. And yeah, culture. So depending on where you are, you're going to experience something different. Like I said, Rasta culture, the surfers, or more of like the beachy towns, more of the wildlife. There's just so much to offer. But it is a very like Caribbean, Latin culture overall. But anyways, there you go, Puerto Rico, Mexico, or Costa Rica. I would say if you have the opportunity to visit all of them, do it. Why not? They're all so beautiful. So beautiful, and everyone's gonna have a different experience. Anyways, so much to offer. They're all safe. I don't know if I went over that with Costa Rica. Oh, Costa Rica is, in my opinion, safe. I mean, I've lived there alone. I've lived there with other people, but it can also be unsafe. If you're living in the middle of the jungle, that can be very scary, especially with venomous, poisonous snakes. I've legit experienced that a lot of times. So that's just dangerous, okay? So there are areas though, especially like San Jose, the main city. I've heard so many things there. If you arrive there at the airport, you got to be in and out. Like, you're not trying to stay there. So you just got to be careful overall. Oh yeah, Costa Rica. Do you need to know Spanish? You need to know basic Spanish, in my opinion. Yeah, some ticos speak English, but for the most part, Spanish is their primary language. So that is what they are going to speak first. If you are there for a short time travel, you can get away with it, but if you're gonna live there, you need to learn basic Spanish. It's just gonna make your experience so much more expansive and beautiful. You know, Spanish in general is such a beautiful language. I used to teach Spanish online, but now I will be offering an online course, and that will be available very soon. So that is why you should subscribe so that you stay updated with all of that good stuff. So that is my video. Those are my experiences. Let me know below, where have you been? What is your favorite place from the 3 that I mentioned? And thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a beautiful day.